Okay, good morning, students. So in the last class, I have told you to write your name for the attendance and roll number. In spite of that, those who have not heard or those who have not understood, please write your name, because we are getting that so many mobile numbers are like that Popocon, who is that fellow? So later on you will be lacking in your attendance, so that you will not be able to face your final exam. This attendance will be count for your exam. So please, all of you, I request all of you to write your name and roll number, so that it will be easy for us also to take your attendance. So today we will be talking about the ptosis, which is also one of the common topic of the disease of the eyelid. So last class we have discussed about the muscles, the LPS. So LPS is our elevator, which elevates the upper eyelid for about 15 millimeters. So with any disease or any problem regarding the different type of the causes will lead to the ptosis. So ptosis is also known as the blepharoptosis, which is the drooping or falling of upper eyelid. So this condition is called lazy eye, but then term normally referred to the condition amblyopia. So it is not called lazy eye. It is the indirect word given to the lazy eye following the ptosis. Because in case of children, if we have a ptosis, then the sensory stimulation will not be able to reach the retina, so that they will have the poor vision. So that leads to the lazy eye. That condition is called amblyopia. But actually ptosis is not the lazy eye. It's a different thing. But following the ptosis, the child may develop the lazy eye. So it's sometimes given as the lazy eye. So you have to understand and not mixed up with these things. So ptosis or blepharoptosis is drooping of the upper eyelid. Normally the upper eyelids covers about 2 millimeters of the cornea, that is the upper limbus. We will not be able to see normally. What is limbus? It is a joining point where the conjunctiva joins with the cornea. So the upper limbus about 2 millimeters is covered with the upper lid. So normally we will not be able to see the upper limbus, and more than that 2 millimeter is covered, then it is the ptosis. And if the it's not covered, if the upper lid is not covered, if you will see a scleral, so the beyond the upper limbus you will see the sclera, that is called the scleral, so then that is proptosis. So it's a Greek term, and which means a fall or falling. So we will discuss about the types, etiology, clinical features, and management of the ptosis. So again, some revision about the anatomy. The retractors of the upper eyelids are levator muscle with its aponeurosis, and a sympathetically innervated superior tarsus muscle, which is called the molar muscle. So we will be coming through the term the molar. So you have to put in mind what is molar muscle. And in the lower lid, the retractors are the capsulopalpable fascia and the inferior tarsus muscle. So upper lid it is LPS and molar, and lower lid it is capsulopalpable fascia and inferior tarsus muscle. So the LPS, which originate in the apex of the orbit from the periorbita near the lesser wing of the sphenoid, just above the annulus of the gene. So it's very important, the origin of the muscle. And the muscle portions of the levator is approximately 40 millimeter long, and aponeurosis is about 14 to 20 millimeter long. So it's a skinny, long muscle which arises from the apex of the orbit, and it has got different insertion site. So as the levator aponeurosis continues towards the tarsus, so you remember it arises from the apex of the orbit and continues downwards towards the tarsus muscle. So you remember where is the tarsus muscle? Beyond the lead 2 millimeter or 2.5 millimeter beyond the lead margin is the tarsus muscle. So near the tarsus muscle or at the border of the tarsus muscle, it divides into anterior and posterior portions and a variable distance above the superior tarsus. So above the superior tarsus muscle, the muscles divides into like this anterior and posterior portions. So the pretarsus orbicularis muscle bundle. So near the pretarsus orbicularis muscle bundle. So the upper eyelid crease is formed by most of the superior of this attachment and by contractions of overlying levator complex. So at the pretarsus orbicularis bundle, the upper eyelid crease is formed by this attachment with this levator muscles with its attachment. Now the upper eyelid fold is created by overhanging of the skin and orbicularis muscle superior to the crease. Now the muscle fibers of the levator muscle which goes and attached to the pretarsus orbicularis, the portion of the attachment is forms the lead crease, upper eyelid crease, and the folds where the muscle is attached over here, and this is forms the lead crease, and this skin portion, overhanging skin portions, this forms a fold, upper eyelid fold. So we have discussed, so it comes this levator aponeurosis, medial onto the medial canthal tendon, lateral onto lateral canthal tendon, facial shapes of the orbicularis muscles over here. So where it's attached to the orbicularis muscle, over here to the orbicularis muscles, there forms a crease, upper eyelid crease, and the folds, overhanging skin, that forms a folds. So it refers to, ptosis refers to the drooping or inferior displacement of any anatomical structures. It refers to the upper eyelid. So we have a congenital and acquired. So in the acquired, we will be discussing more about the acquired rather than the congenital ptosis. We will discuss about the congenital also. But in acquired, myogenic, aponeurotic, neurogenic, mechanical, or traumatic. So we have 4 types of acquired ptosis. So the most common congenital ptosis results from the poorly developed levator muscles, that is a myogenic type. So you may have in the MCQ also, the most common type of myogenic is congenital ptosis, and most common type of acquired ptosis is stretching or even disinsertions of the levator aponeurosis, that is a aponeurotic type. So myogenic, aponeurotic, neurogenic cause, and mechanical. So name itself will give what type of ptosis is. Myogenic means muscles problem, aponeurotic means LPS, aponeurosis problem is there, neurogenic means some neurological cause are there, and traumatic or mechanical cause. So neurogenic ptosis, different causes of the neurogenic ptosis are third nerve palsy, Horner syndrome, Marcus-Gone jaw winking syndrome, and third nerve misdirection. So these are important questions for your practical exam. So what are the causes of the neurogenic ptosis? Or third nerve palsy is very common presentation of the patient. We have weekly or 2-3 patients weekly of the third nerve palsy. So that it's common. So it can result in a neurogenic type of the ptosis. And Hunter syndrome, it occurs due to the oculosympathetic paresis and is characterized by mild ptosis due to the paralysis of molar muscles, miosis due to the paralysis of dilator pupillae, and reduced ipsilateral sweating and hydrosis. So Marcus-Gone jaw winking syndrome and third nerve misdirections. Myogenic is, it occurs due to the acquired disorder of the LPS muscles or of the myoneural junction. So it's a defect in the neurotransmitter so it can occur in the patients with the myasthenia gravis or dystrophic myotonica or ocular myopathy or oculopharyngeal muscular dystrophies. So following the trauma of the LPS or muscle thyrotoxicosis or Lambert-Eaton myasthenia syndrome. Aponeurotic type is develops due to the defect of the levato-aponeurosis in the presence of normal functioning muscle. It includes involutionary or post-operative type. And mechanical type is the dermatocallosis, herniations of the fat due to the dehiscence of the orbital septum, or a big tumor over here, or some edema occurs over here following the trauma. Anterior orbital lesions are there, or due to some other disease condition resulting in the scarring. Besides, there are some conditions which looks like ptosis, but there is not ptosis. It's also a common question which is asked to you in your practical exam. So pseudotosis. So lack of support due to the deficit in the orbital volume in microphthalmus, phthisis bulbi, or anophthalmus. So small eyeball or a phthisis means where there is a shrinkage in the eye content. That is, you cannot identify the ocular structure, but it looks the eye is there. All the volume of the eyeball is shrinkage, and where we cannot identify the ocular structure, that is a phthisis bulbi. Other term is used as the atrophic bulbi, where you can identify the ocular structure, but still there is a shrinkage of the volume of the content, but still you can identify the ocular structure. That condition is called atrophic bulbi. So phthisis bulbi or contralateral lid retraction. So other eye there is a lid retractions, and ipsilateral hypotropia is there, and bow ptosis, brotosis, or dermatocallosis. So congenital ptosis, something about the congenital ptosis, it is associated with congenital weakness, maldevelopment of the LPS muscle. So which can be characterized by drooping of one or both upper eyelid, more often since birth, of variable severity. So mild, moderate, and severe. So congenital ptosis is present since birth. There is a drooping of the upper eyelids where they due to the maldevelopment of the LPS. So which can be mild, which can be moderate, and which can be severe. So how you will grade this mild, moderate, and severe? It depends upon the different type of the examination which we do, like LPS functions or grading of the LPS functions or vertical fissure height. So we will discuss gradually. And lead crease is either diminished or absent. So where frequently in case of the acquired ptosis, we have a lead crease, but in case of congenital ptosis, the lead crease is either decreased or diminished, or it is absent. Or lead lag on down gaze, that is ptotic lead is higher than the normal due to the tethering effect of abnormal LPS muscle. So lead lag on down gaze. And this is in contrast to the acquired ptosis, in which ptotic lead is lower than normal in a down gaze also. So this is also one of the differentiating point between the acquired and congenital ptosis. And LPS function may be poor, fair, or good depending upon the degree of the weakness. So depending upon the LPS function, it is also divided into mild, moderate, and severe type of the ptosis. Based on the absence or presence of other associated features, the congenital ptosis may occur in following form. So it can be simple congenital ptosis where other anomalies are not present, other associated with, which are not associated with other anomalies. So whenever in the last class also I have discussed, whenever there is one congenital anomalies, then we have to think the other congenital anomalies, its association can be present whether in the eye or in the other part of the body. So simple congenital ptosis means it is only the ptosis is present where no other anomalies are present. Congenital ptosis with associated weakness of the superior rectus muscle can be present. It can be present with the blepharophimosis syndrome, which comprises of congenital ptosis, blepharophimosis, telecanthus, and epicanthus inversus. So, which we have discussed, telecanthus, epicanthus inversus in the last class. And congenital synkinetic ptosis is a Marcus jaw winking ptosis. In this condition, there occurs a retractions of the ptotic lid with the jaw movement. So when we move the jaw from either side, there is a improvement of the ptosis. So with the stimulations of the ipsilateral pterygoid muscles. So this is a simple ptosis, and in the first picture, and in this is the blepharophimosis syndrome. So this is different. There is epicanthus inversus, ptosis is there. So how you will evaluate a case of the ptosis? So we go for the history. When is the onset? Whether it is since birth or afterwards, or either which period of the time. And family history, whether there is a family history is present or not, any family members, either maternal or paternal. And durations, what is durations? And systemic disease with diplopia, variability of the ptosis during the day, and excessive fatigue. So it's go in other some systemic diseases, whether it is diplopia, or whether the ptosis is more with the passage of the time, or whether ptosis is more in the evening than in the morning. Ptosis improves with the morning. So these all are the history which gives the systemic relations. And whether it is a unilateral ptosis or bilateral ptosis, any history of trauma or eye surgery or any like systemic disease which leads to the scarring like Stevens-Johnson syndrome or other pemphigoid, ocular pemphigoid. So a detailed history. After the detailed history, we will come to the measurement of the ptosis. So these measurements are very important. Even in case of the lead examinations, if the examiner will ask you how you will examine the lead, then beside the lead margin, eyelashes, diseases, you have to also come to the ptosis, because this lead examinations, this measurement also comes there. So margin reflex distance. It is the distance between the upper lid margin and the corneal reflex of the pen torch held by the examiner at which the patient is directly looking. So I am sitting here. So examiner is saying me, I am looking at the primary position. Examiner is focusing a light over here. Then there will be the reflex at the center of the cornea with the help of that torch light. So from that reflex, the upper lid margin where we will measure with the measured scale. So that is the margin reflex distance. It is about normally 4 to 4.5 millimeter. So margin reflex distance is positive if the upper eyelid is higher than the level of the reflex. So in case of ptosis, if the reflex and this is we can measure it, then it is a positive MRD1. Or negative means it's more drooping is there. Then we have to just elevate like this by putting the scale to measure the reflex. Then that is, if the upper eyelid is lower than the level of the corneal reflex, then it is measured at negative. MRD, margin reflex distance, is negative. And other is a margin reflex distance 2, is a distance between the corneal reflex and the lower lid margin in primary gaze. So I am looking forward, again the torch light is there, then the reflex and the lower lid margin, the distance, that is the MRD2. So measurement greater than 5 millimeter is considered normal over here. So this is how we will measure it. This is a primary gaze and we will put a scale over here, and this is a reflex which is seen, and the distance between the lid margin and this is a MRD1. Now vertical fissure height. It is a distance between the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid at the center of the pupil. At the level of the center of the pupil, if we will measure this, then it's a vertical fissure height. So it's a distance between the upper and lower lid margin measured in a pupillary plane. So upper lid margin normally rests about 2 millimeter below the upper limbus and lower about 1 millimeter above the lower limbus. So lower eyelid just touches the limbal area, just touches the globe, whereas the upper it covers the 2 millimeter of the globe. So normally it is, in case of male it is 7 to 10 millimeter. In case of female, it is 8 to 12 millimeters. So normal vertical fissure height is this. Whereas if there is a ptosis, then mild up to 2 millimeter, it's decreased. Moderate 3 millimeter is decreased, and severe is more than 4 millimeter is decreased. Other most important is about the levator function test, which is called the Brooks method, and it is very important test. And because what type of surgery we will do for the correction of the ptosis, it depends upon the levator function. So that is why this test is very important for you, and you will be asked how you will do this test in your exam also. So it's called a Brooks method. It is measured by placing a thumb firmly against the patient brow. So we will press the thumb like this in the patient brow. So why we will press the thumb like this? So we will press a thumb just to abolish the function of the frontalis muscle, and with the eye in down gaze, and the patient then look up as far as possible, and the amount of exposure is measured with the scale. So what we will do, we will ask the patient to sit with the headrest in the chair like this. Then we will ask the patient to see in down gaze position. Then we will abolish this function and put a scale over here, and after abolishing this function, we will ask the patient to look up, lift the lid, how much you can possibly lift the lid, and the measurement is measured in a scale. So if the person able to lift the upper lid from the down gaze after abolishing the function, if it is 50 millimeter, means the patient has got the normal function. If it is good, fair, and poor, so it's 12 to 14, 5 to 11, and 4 or less than 5 is poor function. So 1 or 2 millimeter, it varies from the books to books also, but you have to know which book you are reading. So like this, you will ask the patient to see down gaze. You will abolish the function with the help of the scale. You will put a scale like this, and you will ask the patient to look up, then you will measure the scale over here. Upper lid crease, so it is a vertical distance between the lid margin and the lid crease in down gaze. So you will ask the patient to look down, and from the lid margin to the lid crease, you will measure the distance. In the female, it is 10 millimeter, and male, it is 8 millimeter. So absence of the crease in a patient with the congenital ptosis is indirect evidence of the poor levator function, whereas the high crease suggests the aponeurotic defect. It is also used to guide the initial incision. So we have already discussed how the lid crease is formed. So the absence of the lid crease or the high lid crease have their own significance. So we will measure like this, down gaze and the distance. Pretarsal, so is a distance between the lid margin and the skin fold with the eye in primary position. So different associated sign with the ptosis. The ptosis is associated with the systemic disease also. So evaluation is of the ptosis, and the this is very important. The history is also very important. So increase in abrasion flow to the levator muscles of the unilateral ptosis. So fatigability is tested by asking the patient to look up without blinking for 30 seconds. So progressive drooping of one or both lids or inability to maintain the off gaze is suggestive of myasthenia gravis. So we will see the fatigability also. And myasthenic ptosis may show the offshoot of the upper lid or saccade from the down gaze to the primary position, which is called the Cogan's twin sign, and also a Hope's or side gaze. So these are also the myasthenic sign or myasthenic ptotic sign. And the oculomotility defect also, some ptosis are levators are involved with the maldevelopment along with the superior rectus muscles also. So particularly of the superior rectus, most of must be evaluated in patient with congenital ptosis. So corrections of the ipsilateral hypotropia may improve the degree of ptosis. So jaw winking phenomena where the ptotic lead is improved. So what is the etiology? So exact etiology is not known, but it has been postulated that the branch of mandibular division of fifth cranial nerve is misdirected to the levator muscle. So we have three major branches of the trigeminal nerve. All of you know, I think, ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. So the mandibular divisions, it is misdirected. So when you wink the jaw or when you move a jaw, then the ptotic lead is improved. It is detected by asking the patient to chew or move the jaw from side to side. And the retractions of the ptotic lead in conjunction with the stimulations of the ipsilateral pterygoid muscles by chewing, sucking, opening the mouth, or contralateral jaw movement. And the Bell's phenomena, it is tested by manually holding the lid open, asking the patients to try to close their eyes and observing upward rotations of the globe. So the weak Bell's phenomena carries a risk of post-operative exposure keratopathy, particularly following the large levator resections or suspension procedure. So this is very important to explain to the patients about the Bell's phenomenon and to check the Bell's phenomenon. So what you will do is you will ask manually holding the lid open, asking the patient. So you will try to open the lid and you will ask the patient to close the lid as properly as possible. And at that time when you will open the lid, you will see the rolling of the globe, means the eye is moving upward. So if that is present, means that the exposure is less. Even the eye is open in case of ptosis, there is no chance of exposure, means. But if there is a exposure is there, then it will leads to the exposure keratopathy. And this Bell's phenomena, in some patients it is very poor and some is poor, then we will have to check and explain to the patient even after the surgery, some amount of this exposure will remain, which result you in difficult in the ocular surface, can result in corneal ulcer also sometimes. But you have to teach a regular exercise to close the eye and frequently, so that it will improve this phenomena. Now coming to the principles of the surgery. So ptosis is not improved with other type of the thing. So to do the correction of the ptosis, we have to do the surgery. So different surgeries are there for the mild, moderate, and severe ptosis. So in case of mild ptosis, you do the Fasanella sorbate procedure. So levator function is at least 10 millimeter is there, and this includes most cases of Horner syndrome and very mild congenital, even congenital ptosis also. So the upper border of the tarsus is excised together with the lower border of the molar muscles and overlying conjunctiva. In case of Fasanella sorbate procedure, which is done in case of mild ptosis. So you have to remember this. It can come in an MCQ. You can be asked in a practical exam also what type of surgery you would like to do in case of ptosis. So mild ptosis, you will go for the Fasanella sorbate procedure. In case of moderate ptosis, you will go for the aponeurotic repair, that is where the excellent levator functions are there. So achievements and suturing of the healthy aponeuretics to the tarsus plate through an anterior or posterior approach, so that it will improve the ptotic eye. So you can do this levator function is 5 or 6 in case of moderate ptosis. And in case of severe ptosis, you go for the frontalis Singh's operations, or which is also called the brow suspension, with the very poor levator functions. So suspensions of the tarsus from the frontalis muscle with the sling consisting of autologous fascia lata or non-absorbable synthetic material are used like proline or silicone. So we use the sling surgery for the severe ptosis. So fascia lata is the material which is used for this sling surgery. So remember, for the bile ptosis, you go for the Fasanella sorbate procedure. For the moderate, you go for apodiuretic repair. And in case of severe ptosis, you go for the frontalis sling operations, or which is also called brow suspension. So this is how you do the sling surgery. And congenital surgery also, the principle of the surgery is same for mild, moderate, and severe. So congenital ptosis is when they will ask the patient to do the surgery. Congenital ptosis surgery is very important to prevent the amblyopia. If it is severe ptosis, you have to go for severe, and moderate ptosis, you have to go for the immediate surgery. But in case of mild ptosis, you can wait. Because once you hamper the vision, so there will not be improvement in the milestone of the vision development will be hampered, resulting in the amblyopia. So the surgery is very important in case of congenital ptosis. So congenital ptosis, it almost always needs a surgical corrections. And in severe ptosis, surgery should be performed at the earliest to prevent the stimulus deprivations, amblyopia. However, in mild and moderate ptosis, surgery should be delayed until the age of 34 years when accurate measurement are possible. So, in case of mild and moderate ptosis, if the LPS function is good, then you can delay the surgery. Congenital ptosis can be treated by any of the following operations. So, the procedures are the same for the adult and congenital ptosis, but only the time is different. In case of congenital, you have to go for the early surgery, and in case of the adult, you can wait and go for the surgery only for the cosmetic purpose in case of adult. So congenital ptosis, you go for the Fasanella sorbate operations, which is called the transfoconjunctivomolarectomy also. So it is performed in cases having mild, that is 1.5 to 2 millimeter, and good levator function. And in case of levator resections, it is very commonly performed operations for the moderate and severe grades of ptosis, and frontalis stings operations are brow suspensions for severe cases. Okay, this is about the ptosis, and in the next class, I think today it will be more topic for you. So in the next class, I have to discuss with the lead tumors. So before that, I have to come to the orbital anatomy also. So I will discuss the anatomy, then I will discuss the tumor. So in the next class, I will discuss about the orbital anatomy.